I knew something was off when I found the break room kombucha tap dripping onto my printed audit packet. Strawberry basil bleeding right through page 4 of a federally binding clause. That was my warning shot. The culture war had reached my desk. It was 9:13 in the evening on a Thursday. I had been working slide 17 for the 5th time because the intern turned creative brand advisor said. The fonts felt a little trauma-coded. I did not know Helvetica could inflict generational damage. But here we were. The office was dead silent except for the rattling vent above my head and the slow clack of my keyboard. Everyone else had cleared out after the afternoon happy hour, still reeking of gin spritz and recycled buzzwords. Me? I was finishing the compliance slides for a $400 million federal renewal. The kind of contract that does not just pay salaries, it is the salary. It was the same contract I had helped lock down 4 years ago under 2 chief financial officers, 3 chief executive officers, and one extremely awkward attempt at rebranding the firm with a therapy dog. I had survived it all by keeping my mouth shut and my documentation tighter than a drum. My name was not on the leadership site, but it was on every dotted line that mattered in Washington. You do not know me, but maybe you should. My name is Harvey Vance. I am 54 years old, and for 15 years, I have been the quiet firewall protecting this company from federal audits. I built the compliance system from the ground up, linking our internal databases to the federal contractor portal. It was a tedious process, but it ensured we never missed a filing. The younger executives viewed me as a relic, a representative of the old school who cared too much about rules and not enough about visual branding. They did not understand that the federal government does not award contracts based on color palettes or catchy slogans. They award them based on strict adherence to regulations. The pitch deck was nearly perfect. Risk profile, budget burn rate, audit trail review, system-level control protocols, color-coded, time-stamped, cross-checked against the new federal guidance that went into effect last Tuesday at 6:04 in the morning. I read the footnotes, folks. That is my sin. As I was exporting the final version, my screen flickered. Then came the ping calendar invite. Presentation restructure, new direction, host human resources. Not the general one either. This was from Chelsea Rollins, the one who says things like "let us disrupt compliance" and wears eyeliner like it is performance art. I opened the invite, no agenda, just a 10 o'clock meeting block and a 3-subject line. You will observe only. I leaned back, listened to the rattle of the vents again, and stared at the flickering cursor like it owed me money. Then I stood up, printed the slides, clipped them, and walked them over to the presentation binder. I always kept hard copies, not because I am old school, but because when the digital world burns down, paper does not ask for a password reset. Friday morning, the new girl was already at my desk. "I am going to use this space for preparation," she said, smiling like she just won a free cruise. Her name was Brooke Barlow. She had bangs, a ring light in her tote, and kept talking about how federal procurement sounded like the ultimate girl boss challenge. She was hired as a social media consultant just 3 months ago, but Chelsea had fast-tracked her career, promoting her to brand advisor because of her presentation skills. They believed that compliance could be sold like a lifestyle brand, ignoring the legal complexities that kept our operations running. When I walked into the human resources meeting, the room smelled like pumpkin spice printer toner and unresolved lawsuits. Chelsea Rollins did not even look up from her dual-screen setup when I entered. She was too busy toggling between a design template and a human resources communication channel. It took her 5 full seconds to acknowledge me. "Harvey." "Hey," she said, voice dripping with corporate cheer. Quick pivot on the presentation. Nothing personal, just optics. The leadership team thought it might be better to have Brooke walk the clients through it. Fresh face, fresh vibe, you get it. "We are streamlining for synergy," she said, sliding over a form. "Please return your access badges and materials. You will retain title and salary, of course. We just want the visuals to feel fresher." I did not move. "Chelsea," she prompted again, eyes still not meeting mine. I opened my bag, reached in, and pulled out the black lanyard with my key card, set it gently on the table, then the fob, still warm from my hand. I placed it next to the lanyard. Lastly, I handed her the slides and the memory drive containing the visual presentation. Thanks, Harvey. We really appreciate your institutional memory, she said it like I was a dusty filing cabinet. I nodded, but before I stood up, I paused just long enough to look her in the eye. You may want to review the bylaws, specifically Clause 14C, I said, and remember to disable multi-factor authentication on the compliance vault before Brooke tries to access it. Wouldn't want her getting locked out mid-slide. Chelsea Rollins blinked. Right. I will have information technology look into that. I nodded. Good idea. I walked out. The corporate world has a way of making you feel invisible when you are the one keeping the lights on. But I knew the value of my documentation. I had spent 15 years building a fortress of compliance, and they were about to walk right into a legal minefield without a map. My email inbox started getting weird within 2 hours. Requests for signatures. System pings that could not complete. An email from procurement marked urgent signature validation error. But I was already gone. I went home, made tea, changed into a hoodie. Then I opened the federal contractor portal and filed a notice. Subject line: named compliance officer terminated. There is something surgical about that phrase. No drama, no slander, just a scalpel cutting through the company's spinal cord. I attached the required documentation: date, time, responsible party, human resources, no replacement listed. Then I sent one more email to the external legal counsel, Bradley Thorne. Subject line: Clause 14C, immediate attention. Sent, logged, filed. Then I sat back, watched the ceiling fan spin, and smiled for the first time in 6 months. Outside, the office was humming, keyboards tapping, espresso machines steaming. I walked past Brooke's desk earlier. She had a color-coded paper roadmap and a coffee cup with a misspelled name. She did not look up. I took the stairs to the garage, keys absent from my loop. At my car, I sat in silence. I pulled out my phone and opened the federal contractor portal. My login still worked. I tapped open Section 14C. Any change in named officer status must be disclosed to the federal contracting agency within 48 hours of status termination. Failure to comply may result in audit delay or disqualification. I drafted the notification and saved it. I knew the regulations backward and forward, and I knew that once the official notice was processed, the clock would start ticking. The federal agency did not play around with compliance officer vacancies, especially not for a contract of this size. Atlas Solutions was about to face a hard lesson in federal procurement law. Then, with no emotion in my voice, I called the company's external counsel, Bradley Thorne. Voicemail. I left a message. Hi, this is Harvey Vance. Please check the bylaws, Clause 14C, and the federal portal. There has been a change. Then I ended the call. Back in my apartment, I changed into pajamas, reheated some frozen chili, and turned on the television. I did not feel sad, not really, just cold. Like something old had cracked loose inside me and was drifting out to sea. I let it go, let it all go, and smiled. At 6:42 the next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee, 3 fingers of bourbon, and the kind of silence that makes you feel like a sniper. My inbox was already ticking, automated alerts from our contract management software. A few confused access logs trying to route my credentials, and one perky invite from Brooke marked presentation rehearsal vibes. I deleted that one. Then I opened the federal contractor portal and logged in. The interface was clunky, but I knew it backwards. I clicked into compliance officer records. Status, active. Clicked modify officer status. Termination type, involuntary role eliminated. Effective date, yesterday. Reason for termination, administrative restructuring. I uploaded a portable document format file of Chelsea's offboarding form. She had just stuck her digital signature on a template. I clicked submit. Just like that, the company no longer had a legally certified named compliance officer on file for its largest federal contract. It felt clean. The portal generated an automated response, confirming the submission and updating the agency status flag. I logged out, knowing the system would now flag any attempt to submit the renewal without a certified officer. Next, I drafted a meeting request to Owen Pierce and Bradley Thorne. Subject: Clause 14's immediate attention. I did not add a body to the invite. Bradley was old school. He would understand the silence. That clause number alone would slap him awake. I checked the meeting list. The leadership team had scheduled a pre-pitch war room call, and human resources had a wellness session. I packed up my printed files. Every protocol version, every email chain, all proof of access logs, all neat, dated, and unassailable. I checked LinkedIn and saw Brooke's profile. She had already updated her title to Federal Client Compliance Lead, with hashtags like Ready to Lead and Digital Compliance. There was even a photo of her in the office with my mug in the background. I stared at that photo, then opened a secure application and pinged a contact at the contracting agency to verify status changes. They replied in 4 minutes, acknowledged, reviewing. By 9:20, I saw a new status banner. Agency review in progress pending compliance officer reassignment. At 9:27, my access credentials were now fully revoked. Chelsea was moving fast. Probably thought she was covering her bases. She did not realize I had already filled out the exit paperwork for the entire company. At 9:43, my phone buzzed. Bradley Thorne, external counsel. "Harvey," he said, "no preamble. What is going on? I would advise checking Clause 14C and logging into the federal portal. They terminated the named officer without board notification." A pause, then a slow exhale. Jesus, I sent all the necessary files. Logs, documents, Chelsea's forms. I did not include the presentations. "You are welcome." I heard him shuffle paper. "Do they know what they triggered?" "They will," I said. "I am not fighting them, Bradley. I am just documenting." He excelled at legal analysis, and I knew he would advise the board immediately. He chuckled, grim. "God help them if you ever do decide to fight." "I am not a fighter," I replied. "I am a firewall." I hung up. By 10:15, I was logged into the meeting room. Bradley joined, looked 10 years older, and did not bother with greetings. He just said, "I need escalation clearance for a board-level emergency session." I nodded. They will be too busy talking about fonts and synergy to see it coming. Then I leaned back, hands folded, and waited. Not for permission, not for apology, but for the inevitable. It took less than 24 hours for them to slap a corporate sticker over my grave. By 8:30 the next morning, the company's LinkedIn page featured Brooke, grinning in front of the whiteboard, flanked by the brand team. The caption thanked the fearless federal team and fresh energy. I downloaded the image and saved the post as a document. I spent the rest of the morning lurking in the shadows of our public-facing portals. My name had vanished from the compliance landing page, but the policy indexes still credited me. Meanwhile, the chief executive officer, Julian Briggs, was doing his usual posturing. He scheduled a meeting and reportedly said the word synergy 9 times in 4 minutes. Someone told me he fist-bumped Brooke mid-call and said, "Let us break the mold, kid." The mold was broken, all right, like toxic mold through drywall. The internal counsel, Owen Pierce, a nice enough guy with the personality of a wet socks and the reflexes of a taxidermy deer, finally noticed something odd in the federal submission portal around noon. I know because he tried to access a document and hit a credential lockout. He pinged the contracts team on their communication channel. "Hey team, who is listed as our compliance officer on the submissions packet? Just got a weird status hold message." No one answered because they assumed I was still in the background, invisible and humming like infrastructure. The pipes that run behind the walls, the electricity you do not think about until it is gone. I watched the communication channel erupt when the system flagged an officer verification pending alert and blocked the finalization tab. Chelsea replied with a digital animation of a confused cat, but no one pinged me. I did have one ally, though, Fiona Gallagher from Facilities. She texted me, "Did they just give your role to the girl who asked if we needed a permit to use highlighters?" I replied with an emoji. She responded, "They are going to choke on their own essential oils. You okay?" I was watching the scaffolding tremble, knowing that the structural integrity of the firm was about to fail because they forgot to check the foundation. By 3 o'clock, internal counsel Owen Pierce had flagged the submission error up the chain. Julian Briggs dismissed it in a message thread saying, "It is a cash issue. Legal will sort it out. Focus on the pitch." I saved that message too. It would age like unrefrigerated seafood. From my apartment, I kept reading, watching, listening. The whole machine was still clunking forward, oblivious to the broken gear they had yanked out. I even tuned into a company-wide video stream, since they had forgotten to revoke my access. Brooke opened with a joke about acronyms. "I used to think the Freedom of Information Act was a brand of yogurt," she laughed. Nobody corrected her error. They all just clapped. I took a sip of wine and opened my file labeled "If they keep going." Inside, a screenshot of the terminated compliance officer notice from the federal portal, the timeline of access name removal, and a copy of the bylaws. With Clause 14 highlighted in screaming yellow, it was not a threat. It was just evidence, pure and clean. They did not see me anymore, but I was still here, watching the lights flicker. The pre-review dry runs started at 9 o'clock. Julian Briggs was pacing, while Brooke stood beside him. They had invited a handful of stakeholders, 2 junior legal consultants, a veteran contractor, and a federal liaison. Brooke kicked things off with a slide in an informal font. Julian leaned into the microphone, promoting fresh leadership and bold visuals. The contractor cleared his throat. Who signed off on the compliance officer compliance packet? There is no digital signature from the listed officer. Silence. Brooke looked at Julian. Julian looked at Chelsea, who was perched in the back with a juice bottle. She waved a hand. We will fix it later. The liaison frowned. No signature means it has not been reviewed by a certified named officer. 10 minutes later, in a conference room, internal counsel Owen Pierce was scrolling through the logs with dread. He tapped through the history, realizing what Clause 14 actually meant. Any change in named compliance officer status must be disclosed in writing to the board within 48 hours of termination, or all compliance actions are deemed null. He searched for my name. No results in the past 72 hours. He sent an urgent email, Clause 14C Review Board Notification Status Unknown. Copied Chelsea, Julian, Brooke, and external counsel. Blind copied me. At 10:12 in the morning, a private invite hit my inbox. Emergency Session Board Compliance Crisis at 2:30 in the afternoon. I opened it and smiled. They still had not revoked my invite access. My permissions were tied to the original compliance officer role. The agenda was a masterpiece of panic. Meanwhile, Chelsea Rollins was on damage control, flooding the channels with upbeat emojis and empty reassurance. Minor bump in the portal. Teamwork makes the dream work. Owen Pierce and Brooke did not respond. Outside counsel had already briefed the board chair. Inside the war room, Julian Briggs tried to propose a workaround, but Bradley Thorne shut that down. Federal regulations require compliance officer certification to be active at the time of filing. Chelsea tried to argue the termination was symbolic. Owen pulled up the portal alert. Compliance officer status terminated, no successor filed. The room went completely quiet. At 1:47, another email pinged, subject, legal strategy. Inside were 5 bullet points. The final one simply said, Option E, reach out to Harvey Vance, temporary recertification pathway. I did not reply. Instead, I scrolled to the bottom of the invite and added one quiet comment to the document thread. Clause 14C exists for a reason. You were given every chance to read it. No emoji, no signature, just documentation. The tension in the email exchange was palpable, with each party trying to shift the blame to someone else. Chelsea tried to argue that human resources had the authority to restructure, but Owen pointed out that the bylaws were clear about board certification. They were realizing that their visual makeover had created a massive regulatory gap. At 2:30 sharp, the board meeting started. I did not log in. The boardroom was silent. Julian Briggs, the chief executive officer, came in late, still muttering about slide transitions. He dropped his phone onto the table. Let us keep this tight, folks. I have got a rehearsal with Brooke at 3. He did not sit. He preferred to stand. Owen Pierce was already seated, tie crooked and face pale. Bradley Thorne, the external attorney, was on screen. We will begin by reviewing the bylaws. Section 6A, Bradley said. No federal client documentation may proceed without the active signature of the named compliance officer. Bradley leaned forward. Harvey Vance is the officer listed. As of last Thursday, he was terminated. There has been no board vote to reassign the role. As far as the federal portal is concerned, you are currently non-compliant. Julian scoffed. We handled the handoff. HR took care of it. All eyes turned to Chelsea. She blinked, smiled weakly. It was not formal. We did not think Harvey was still critical to operations. Brooke has been presenting. She has the deck. Bradley did not blink. She has a deck. Harvey had legal designation. That role is not a matter of delegation or positive vibes. It is federally enforced. Owen cleared his throat, voice shaking. We did not notify the board. There was no vote logged. Clause 14C was not triggered per protocol. Julian looked confused. What does that mean? We have already queued the submission. Are you saying we are not eligible? Bradley sighed. I am saying you do not have a certified named officer, which means your $400 million contract renewal is not only stalled, but subject to immediate disqualification. The chief financial officer looked up and said, "Wait, is this going to trigger financial clawbacks?" Bradley nodded once. It is possible. If the agency deems the lapse as intentional misrepresentation, yes. And if they audit past filings tied to Harvey's name post-termination, he did not finish the sentence. The board members exchanged worried glances, realizing the scale of the disaster. The silence that followed was not quiet. Chelsea opened her mouth, then closed it. The board chair turned to Julian. "You allowed this?" "I did not fire him," Julian said, defensive now. "That was human resources call. He was our firewall," someone whispered. Owen Pierce added he submitted everything on time. Never a single penalty under his oversight. He knew every clause like scripture. Bradley leaned in again. "And you replaced him with someone who misspelled compliance in a social media post. That is when the real unraveling began." I sipped bourbon and scrolled through the agency portal. Status: Officer authorization not filed. Next review date: submission locked. I clicked refresh and let the page sit open, let them fumble. I was waiting for the consequences to catch up, and they were getting close. By 4:52 in the afternoon, the boardroom reeked of stress. The $400 million contract was locked behind a digital gate, and the clock was ticking toward midnight. Owen Pierce had gone silent, tapping furiously on his keyboard. Bradley was still on the monitor, his jaw clenched. Chelsea was fidgeting with a stress stone. Julian tried to retake control of the room. "Bring Harvey back. Simple fix." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "You cannot," he said. "Reinstatement of named officer post-termination shall not restore eligibility until full recertification is completed. Estimated processing time, 5 to 10 business days. Once you offboard a named compliance officer, the federal system treats that status as expired. No backdating. It is not a weekend freelance gig. It is clearance-level authority. The regulations were designed to prevent exactly this kind of administrative manipulation, and the federal database was unyielding. There was no workaround, no backdoor, and no way to bypass the system's security checks. "So, what are you saying?" Julian asked, voice sharper now. "That we are just finished?" Bradley did not answer. Owen did not either. Instead, all eyes slowly turned toward the one name that had not been spoken. Mine. I had been silent on the call the entire time, microphone muted, camera off. I had accepted the invite to observe, nothing more. But now they needed me. "Harvey?" the board chair asked gently. "Do you have any comment?" I unmuted. "The process is clear," I said calmly. "You had the slides, you should have read the rest." Julian opened his mouth, but no words came out. "You were warned," I continued. Clause 14C was cited in multiple documents. The recertification delay was in every onboarding packet. Human Resources chose to interpret my exit as a decorative reshuffle. Legal should have known better. I leaned forward, speaking directly now. "This is not about feelings. It is about documentation, and the documentation is airtight." Chelsea tried to find her footing. We were not trying to undermine anything. We just thought, we assumed that I was replaceable," I offered, voice still steady. The board chair sighed. "What would it take to recertify?" 5 business days if you rush it. 10 if you follow proper protocol." Julian looked at the clock. "We do not have 5 days. The deadline is midnight, and the system will not accept an invalid signatory," Bradley added flatly. "Not unless you want to commit federal fraud, in which case I will need to excuse myself from representation." Julian sat down hard. Owen closed his laptop slowly. Someone muttered a prayer, and then, as if summoned by irony itself, an alert popped up on the screen. Federal portal notification, final submission lock initiated. Deadline 11:59 in the evening. Status: ineligible, no active named compliance officer. The room fell into silence. Julian slumped forward, staring down at his phone. Chelsea finally set down her stress stone. Her hands were trembling. I spoke once more. "This is not personal. It is procedural." And then I logged off. The realization that they had thrown away a $400 million contract for visual branding was settling over them like a toxic cloud. They had ignored the firewall, and now the system was burning down around them. The pen made a soft tapping sound against the table, barely audible, but it cut through the air. Julian was gripping it so tight, his knuckles were white. At 12:02 in the morning, the federal portal refreshed automatically on the large screen, and the words "No chief executive officer ever wants to see" came up. Contract renewal expired. Status: ineligible. Named compliance officer not verified. No bells, no sirens. Just a red line across $400 million in expected revenue and a digital tombstone where the deal used to be. No extensions, no appeals, no sympathy. Owen Pierce excelled like he had been underwater. Chelsea was still staring at her laptop, lips moving but no sound coming out. It would not help. On the screen, another set of alerts rolled in. Automated flag, audit required notice, potential clawback review, 18-month window. Someone in the room made a quiet choking sound. Julian finally set the pen down gently. He looked up, eyes hollow. Chelsea looked at him like a child expecting to be grounded. He just rubbed his temples. The sheer weight of the loss was staggering. $400 million gone because of a visual restructuring. The board members were already muttering, their voices sharp and accusatory. Bradley Thorne on the screen was closing his folders, his expression clinical. "There is nothing more we can do tonight, Julian," he said. "I will need to prepare the board for the incoming regulatory fallout. We should expect the formal notice of disqualification by morning, followed closely by the audit request. I suggest you contact your major shareholders before the press gets hold of this." Julian did not respond. He just stared at the table, his signature style and confidence completely shattered. That is when I walked into the building for the final time. The security guards at the front desk, who had not yet been notified of my credential revocation, let me through with a nod. I took the elevator to the executive floor. The hallway was quiet, but the boardroom was a hive of silent panic. Every pair of eyes followed me as if I had walked in wearing a judge's robe. I approached the head of the table, calm, carrying one small black memory drive. I placed it gently in front of Julian. "These are your archive protocols," I said, fully updated. "They cover every certification, revision, and change request submitted during my tenure. You will need them for the upcoming federal audit. The files are organized by quarter, with full cross-references to the compliance ledger. I have also included the backup logs from the compliance vault, proving that all submissions made under my authority were fully compliant. I also included the access tokens and security logs, showing that I had not touched the system since human resources took my keycard. This will protect you from any false claims of unauthorized system access during the transition. I suggest you hand these over to the inspectors immediately when they arrive on Monday morning. They do not accept excuses, only documentation." Julian did not move. He just stared at the drive. Chelsea, whose eyes were wide with panic, looked like she wanted to speak, but she knew she had no ground left to stand on. She had wanted synergy and fresh energy, and now she had a bankrupt enterprise. "I trust," I continued, "someone else will present them next time." I looked at Brooke Barlow, who was sitting in the corner, holding a presentation deck like it was a shield, tears streaming down her face. She was probably already searching for new roles on her phone. I turned without waiting for thanks and walked out. No applause, no standing ovation, just silence. Precise, devastating, final. As I passed the elevators, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished chrome. The same blazer, the same hair pulled back, but something behind the eyes had shifted. I was not invisible anymore. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. I pulled my coat tighter, stepped out onto the pavement, and did not look back. I had no reason to do so. I could feel it behind me, the building still lit, still buzzing, still full of people who thought procedure was optional until the walls caught fire. Now the walls were burning, and I was already walking into the dark, clean air, leaving the smoke behind. Within 2 months, Atlas Solutions was forced to restructure under bankruptcy protection. The loss of the renewal triggered a default on their primary credit line, and the subsequent federal audit revealed multiple administrative irregularities in the marketing department's filings. Chelsea Rollins was dismissed by the board of directors within 48 hours of the contract expiration, her career in corporate branding effectively over. Brooke Barlow went back to freelance consulting, her LinkedIn profile quietly scrubbed of any mention of compliance leadership. Owen Pierce resigned to take a low-profile role at a small municipal utility. and Julian Briggs was replaced as chief executive officer by a turnaround specialist who did not care about synergy. As for me, I took a senior advisory role at the federal contracting agency itself, helping to oversee the compliance standards for the entire sector. I now sit in a spacious corner office in Washington, where rules are respected and procedures are followed to the letter. My name is on the official directory now, and when Atlas Solutions' new management tried to apply for a minor subcontract last week, my office was the one that flagged their past violations and rejected their application. Now, I am the one who reviews the submissions. Alone, but never unnoticed again. You are the real heroes of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to follow along, or the coffee pot might just run cold on your next shift.